Inyo, Congressman Rog.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I just have a few questions based on the ARs that we've done. And given that this is already our fourth hearing, I'm sure COA is very much used to our questioning, and I hope they could indulge us some more. Actually, Mr. Chair, yung aking mga katanungan is supposedly directed to the Special Disbursement Officer of the OVP, because under my understanding, based on the joint memo, this would have been SDO Acosta's responsibility, because under number 6.3.2, Section B, it is part of the Special Disbursing Officer's responsibility to maintain separate records of all transactions and to retain a certified copy or duplicate copy of the required supporting documents and reports on utilization. However, and my questioning is precisely on this, on the acknowledgement receipts attached as justification, yung documentary evidence presented. However, given that the SDO Acosta is not around, I guess we'll be forced to at least to get this some of the answers I'll be forced to ask the COA. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'd like to direct my questions perhaps to Attorney Camora from the ICFAO, if they would be so kind to indulge. Just as to add context po, no, Attorney Camora. We know po that the confidential funds are special in the sense that they respond to, they pertain to a certain purpose only allowable under the Joint Memo Circular. But this does not mean that this is a blank check po, no? It's not a blanket authority that it could be spent without justification. Would that be a fair statement po?
Attorney Camora, you're recognized.
That is correct po, Your Chair.
So,
Mr. Chair.
in line with that and in line with the requirements of the COA, you would ask actually for liquidation reports. Although it's special in the sense that it is directed only to the chairman of the COA, you still have the ICFAO to study this. And in fact, it is the ICFAO who gives the AOMs the notice of disallowance and the notice of credit in relation to confidential fund spending. Is that correct, Mr. Chair?
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
So, Mr. Chair, given the, maybe no, I have a timeline again of the 2022 confidential fund usage of the OVP. If I understand correctly, it was disbursed within 11 days. This was for December of 2022, and the basis of the funds was a transfer from the contingent fund. But there was an AOM issued by your office. Anong date po nito?
Mr. Chair, the first AOM is dated September 14, 2023.
So for the 2022 confidential funds, September 2023 yung AOM. And the response by the Office of the Vice President was received around what time po kaya?
It was received by the ICFAO on October 19, 2023, Mr. Chair.
October 2023. And one of the findings there was insufficient the DEPs po, no? And this would be pertaining to, in support of the liquidation reports, yung ating mga acknowledgement receipts. Because compared to usual spending by government wherein we actually need official receipts, kapag ang pinag-uusapan po ay confidential or intelligence funds, because precisely confidential dapat yung usage nito, it is sufficient to submit acknowledgement receipts. Tama po ba?
Mr. Chair, since the requirement is documentary evidence of payment, not necessarily official receipt.
Correct.
So they could submit acknowledgement
Attorney Camora,
receipts.
pwede pong pakilakasan po ninyo yung boses ninyo.
Documentary evidence of payment po ang required sa joint circular. So the acknowledgement receipts are acceptable po.
Acceptable. Correct po, no? And I agree with that. So the acknowledgement receipts are acceptable. However, one of the findings of the AOM was kulang nga po yung DEPs. And this is pertaining to the acknowledgement receipts.
The first time na nag-liquidate po sila, wala po talagang submitted na DEPs.
Opo. So that's why you had the AOMs in September 2023. Part of the findings was the lack of the DEPs, precisely yung mga ARs natin, and then they answered in October 2023. When they filed in October 2023, was it already there, yung DEPs? Yung justification po nila?
Yes, Mr. Chair, it was part of their compliance.
So it was submitted October 2023. After that, there was a notice of disallowance pertaining to that quarter. Kailan po ito na-issue?
Mr. Chair, before that, a notice of suspension was issued. So Normally, after the AOM is issued and the COA is not satisfied with the compliance, we issue a notice of suspension, which was issued on December 13, 2023.
December 2023. And the notice of suspension you mentioned is when the COA is not satisfied. So yung pagsubmit po ng October 2023 DEPs, hindi pa po satisfied yung COA. And what was the reason that you were not satisfied? Mali-mali po ba yung mga AR or kulang pa po yung mga AR?
May mga ibang ARs po na may issues and may kulang pa po na additional documentation on other ARs.
And when after the notice of suspension for December 2023, they were given another chance to submit additional documents. Is that correct? Or wala na po?
Meron pa, Mr. Chair.
Meron pa.
They were given 90 days.
90 days.
To,
When did they, apologies, when did they submit their additional DEPs po? In response to the notice of suspension?
Mr. Chair, we received their compliance on March 13, 2024.
March 2024. And finally, I suppose after this, ito na po yung disallowance?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Anong date po ng disallowance po natin?
The disallowance is dated August 8, 2024, Mr. Chair.
August 2024. Thank you. I'll get back to that po. No? I wanted to establish a timeline because one of the things that we have found with the acknowledgement receipts is that there seemed to be a disconnect in regarding relation to the dates, especially considering the fourth quarter of 2022 CF. Mr. Chair, maybe ask the Secretariat. I don't know if they've prepared it. I want to flash on screen an acknowledgement receipt. Here. Is the date legible po sa inyo? Can you see? I'd like to confirm that the date that it says is actually December 28, 2023. Do you see that, Attorney Camora?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
And supposedly this was attached. I'm not sure if this would come in for the first batch of response in December 2023 or if it came in with the second batch of response in March 2024. But this is supposedly a DEP presented for the fourth quarter of 2022. Isn't it strange, not really strange, it's outright false for it to justify an expense in 2022, but the date is 2023. Would that be correct, Ms. Camora? Attorney Camora?
That is correct, Mr. Chair. Actually, one of the findings under the notice of suspension is that some of the acknowledgement receipts were dated December 2023 and some were even undated.
Yes. And this would be the basis for disallowance? Or was this, this was the findings of the AOM po, no?
Yes, that is under the notice of suspension na po,
The
Mr. Chair.
suspension.
Since nakapag-comply na sila, so yung observation namin was already under the notice of suspension po.
How would it be complied po, Attorney Camora? How did they rectify the AR? My understanding po is pag submitted po yung AR, this is already supposedly presumed to be regular, and then you have an outright problem such as 2023. Although you might say na typographical error, but correct me if I'm wrong, this happens more than once po. Is that correct, Attorney Camora?
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
Would you know how many ARs exactly yung dated 2023 submitted for 2022?
Mr. Chair, we have attached it in the original notice of suspension. However, we do not have the figures today.
Sige po. Well, just to help you po, no, based on our study, 158 of the acknowledgement receipts have that typographical error. We would understand the typographical error if it happens once or twice, and at most for one individual to make that mistake multiple times. But for supposedly acknowledgement receipts which come from different sources, this should be different people issuing it po, diba? These are different people signing off for different expenses. Now, for 158 people to make the same mistake, is that something that would be acceptable? Is that an acceptable margin of error for the COA?
Mr. Chair, they answered in their compliance. As to the
Mr. Chair, apologies. Maybe what does it mean to answer with the compliance? So they took back yung AR na mali po yung date, or
no, Mr. Chair, yung compliance nila contained their answers why they had acknowledgement receipts dated December 2023 and undated acknowledgement receipts.
and what was the answer po, Attorney Camora?
They said they have inadvertently contained clerical or typographical errors indicating 2023 instead of 2022. Considering the nature of confidential activities which are usually conducted discreetly and completed within a short period of time, and in addition to the lack of attention to details of personnel attending to voluminous papers from several individuals, some data in the acknowledgement receipts submitted as proof of transactions may have been missed.
Mr. Chair, apologies. I think that portion would suffice po, Attorney Camora. No? So the answer of compliance, they did not dispute, they did not take back the ARs, but they simply gave that defense that it was an inadvertence, or basically typo nga po siya. But precisely the point, Mr. Chair, that I think that the committee should consider is that it's a typographical error for 158 acknowledgement receipts. This is not something that I think, although we do not argue with the COA, of course, this is their jurisdiction. It is precisely their decision if that compliance would be sufficient. However, I think for us to consider in strengthening the laws that we are going to craft, in support perhaps of the joint memorandum circular, I think we have to be stricter with the acknowledged receipts to be issued. Because, Mr. Chair, I would like to propose one thing. Of course, the COA will not be able to answer this. But given the timeline po, no, September 2023 yung first na AOM, the October 2023 was the compliance with the first batch of ARs, and then December 2023, the notice of suspension. And that was the time siguro po, no, that they were coming up with these new ARs. It would make more sense, Mr. Chair, for them to make that mistake. Because pag nagkaka-typographical error po natin sa date, the usual mistake is you put on the date that is current. Isn't it possible, Mr. Chair, based on human experience, isn't it more likely that these ARs were prepared a year after the fact already? That they were prepared in December 2023, because this precisely coincides with the date in which they submitted the second batch of the ARs. I don't think, Mr. Chair, this was a mistake that was committed in December 2022. This was a mistake that was committed after the fact, after the AOM, and after the notice of suspension, when they were rushing to comply with yung mga butas po na lahat ng COA. I think this is something that the committee should consider, especially when it comes to the compliance with the COA. We are not faulting the COA, of course, and we respect them. This is their jurisdiction. But one thing that we understand, that we see from the COA, is that generally they are not really ministerial, but they would err on the side of caution rather than put themselves in the place to, exercise discretion regarding the disbursements by any agency. Sa kanila po, as long as complied yung DEP, and as long as there's an explanation, they would accept it. However, I think the COA has to go above and beyond that requirement. Because, Mr. Chair, just to highlight also how spurious this seems and how bogus. If December 2022 po yung date dapat ng AR, tapos December 2023 yung date, it wouldn't even correspond to any confidential funds. It's not possible if ever the reasoning was nagkapalitan ng AR, because I understand that might be one of the excuses for inadvertence. Baka nagkapalitan yung AR for December 23 and December 2022. Pero wala pong December 2023. If we recall, the fourth quarter of the confidential funds for the Office of the OVP was never dispersed. They chose, although it was already included in the our General Appropriations Act, they chose not to disperse yung fourth quarter. So saan po na ilalagay itong December 2023 AR if, in fact, they would say inadvertence, nagkapalitan yan, or if they say typographical error naman, it wouldn't make sense. What's that doing in December 2022? 158 times po nangyari. More likely, this was the same mistake committed by perhaps a few persons, which raises the question, are these acknowledgement receipts spurious? Are they bogus? Are they false? In addition to that, Mr. Chair, I'd like to present another acknowledgement receipt. If the Secretariat could please flash yung November one po.
Kong Rog, gusto ko lang linawin. 158 times na ang date ay 2023.
Mr. Chair, based on what our office has found, 158 of the ARs corresponding to 23.8 million were submitted for the for the fourth quarter of 2022 disbursement, but they were citing 2023. Ang sabi nga po ng COA na ang citing the answer of the OVP is that inadvertence po.
Ang dami naman pagkakamali nun. Kung magkakamali ka, dapat isa lang. Eh sa 2023, last quarter, wala na silang confidential funds. So parang lumalabas, lumagpas yung kanilang liquidation. Sobra-sobra yung liquidation na nilabas nila. Tama po ba yung pagkakaintindi ko sa sinasabi ninyo?
Well, Mr. Chair, your guess is the same as ours, but it could also be na these are ARs belatedly prepared.
Ah, okay. Sige po. Thank you po. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, proceeding onward, may we ask the Secretary to flash yung November 17, 2023 AR. Yun. Thank you. Attorney Camora, is it legible po? Can you see that the date is November 27, sorry, 2023? The 2022.
November, I cannot see it. November 17, Mr. Chair?
November 27 po, 2022.
27.
Well, Attorney Camora, apologies, perhaps di lang kita masyado sa screen, but on paper nakita po na November 27, 2022 po siya. If my understanding is correct, the AR should correspond to the period of the confidential funds actually dispersed and used. Tama po ba? So although it is for the fourth quarter of 2022, this was submitted as an AR there, it should correspond to the 11 days of disbursement po that they actually had it. Because if I understand correctly, anong date nga po yung first, yung pag-issue nung check for the OVP confidential funds?
Ano? December 20, 2022, Mr. Chair.
December 20, 2022. So definitely, this is after November 27, 2022. Would the COA have, of course, I would not fault COA for this. This is supposedly a question for the Special Disbursing Officer, si SDO Acosta, but given that she's not here, I am constrained to ask the COA, para saan po kaya would this be considered? Because if we also consider, baka sabihin naman natin na typographical error, baka dapat November 2023 po ito, wala rin pong fourth quarter confidential funds ang OVP for 2023. Tama po ba?
Tama po, Mr. Chair.
So in that case, how would the COA appreciate this acknowledgement receipt?
Normally, Mr. Chair, it should be noted that confidential funds should not be used as payment for reimbursement of previous activities. So it would have been flagged as a reimbursement expense, so not allowed.
So this would have been disallowed totally. And perhaps there's a good chance that this is part of the disallowance actually of your But I think, Mr. Chair, what is striking for this committee is, of course, the COA has already acted on the disallowance. But what should be considered is the fact that this could not have happened. I mean, reimbursement might be one explanation, but how could you reimburse something that this was even the first batch of confidential funds? December 21 po ba? Tama ba? December 21?
December 20, Mr. Chair, yung date ng check.
December 20 po yung check. This is the first confidential funds ever issued to the OVP for this administration. Yet they have acknowledged receipts for November 27, 2022. Ibig sabihin po, wala pa pong confidential funds. They're already coming up with their acknowledgement receipts.
Mr. Chair, with the indulgence of Congressman Rodriguez, may I just...
Congressman Abante.
Bago ko makalimutan to, no? Nakalagay dito, yung pakianong audit yung, acknowledgement receipt yan. Ito po ba ay allowed ng COA? Pag gumamit ka nung 150,000 na rewards, pakiano nga yung acknowledgement receipt, pakilagay nga uli. Ayan. Allowed po ba ng COA yan? Yung payment of rewards nakalagay medicines? Allowed po ba ng COA yan?
Mr. Chair, that is one of the observations po. Na,
So therefore, kung yan ang observation nyo, dinisallow nyo.
yes, Mr. Chair. Part
Okay,
of the
so that
disallowance
was
niyo.
actually 150,000 used for payment of rewards for medicines was disallowed by COA. Ganun po ba?
It is one of the disallowed accounts, Mr. Chair, yung payment of reward medicines.
Ito, disallowed to, di ba?
Probably, sir, since kasama naman siya
Teka, attorney, but probably.
Yes, sir. Since it is an acknowledgement
Di
receipt
ba?
of payment of rewards.
You're a good lawyer. You cannot just say probably. You have to be sure about it, di ba? So, di talagang disallowed to, di ba?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
O yan, Mr. Chair, thank you.
Please continue, Congressman Rog.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Congressman Abante. Basically, what we're trying to say here po, no, in relation to the dates, whether this is for reimbursement of, although illegal po, no, it's not supposed to be allowed. Whether this was a justification for reimbursement or this was inadvertence or typographical errors, despite being repeated over 158 times, these are clear red flags po in relation to the AR submitted by the office. And this is something that we should consider. Looking forward, we should consider po this in aid of legislation, perhaps legislation to strengthen this joint circular to make sure that this doesn't appear again, or perhaps stringent penalties for when this is caught. But more important than that, we still have to hold them accountable po, no? For this, although this is already passed, although there's already this notice of disallowance, accountability should be had for this. Now, in addition po, moving forward from these erroneous dates or inadvertent dates, I would like to present another documentary evidence. May we have po the Secretariat flash yung acknowledgement receipt for Mr. or Miss NP. Yun. Attorney Camora, when we're talking of acknowledgement receipts, basically it's something like this one. It's very bare. It just has the amount received, for what purpose, and you have the name and the date. That's all that is required. However, when it comes to the name, is this usually the name of the person or signature or both?
They would give us normally yung name and signature, but actually the signature is which is more important
Which is
to the
more
COA. Since we know that unsigned documents are really not good documents. So, kung signature lang, okay lang po siya. Pero kung name lang po, we will flag it as unsigned document po.
Yes. And what is the reasoning for this? Because a name can be written by anyone, but a signature is supposedly unique. Is that a fair statement?
Yes,
Mr.
Mr. Chair.
So what happens when, for example, here, it may not be seen, it's redacted precisely because it's confidential. However, it could be noted that this name was written in block letters, which are not distinctive by any manner, yet this was what was submitted as an acknowledgement receipt. So in cases such as this, it's very possible that someone purporting to be Mr. NP is writing the name for NP. Would that be correct, Attorney Camora?
That is correct, Mr. Chair.
So in this case, this would be another case of an irregular AR. Would that be correct?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
And of course, when it comes to the ARs that are just block letters and names, because precisely it could be purporting to be that person, but signed by anyone else, this should be disallowed, Mr. Chair. But of course, as mentioned again by Attorney Camora, alam ko baka narinig din na po kayo with all of these questions for the ICFAO, which are all redundant. But it just is an additional proof po that what we're looking at here are red flags when it comes to acknowledgement receipts. And I think we really should strengthen po siguro the DEPs that would be required for confidential funds. Kasi po, hindi po to biro. And if you look at it, precisely, we're talking about a single payment for 400,000 pesos as a reward payment, which could be anyone because hindi nga po signed. Kung sa mga signatures nga po, nagkakaduda tayo kung totoo yung signature. Paano pa kaya pag walang signature at all? How do we know that this person exists? These are some issues that we should consider po, Mr. Chair, when we're going to craft our legislation to strengthen po yung Joint Memorandum Circular. Mr. Chair, I had other questions, but I think this could only be answered by SDO Acosta. So I would like to manifest that I would like to join po yung, I have the same sentiments as Chairman Abante that these persons invited should appear at least it would be our 5th hearing already, and still we have no answers. And I think it would the answers really rely on their attendance, and this is only for the accountability, for the truth that our people would see. So I think we should really have a harder stance for requiring their attendance. So with that, Mr. Chair, I would now defer and yield to our other colleagues here today. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, COA.
Thank you, Congressman Rodriguez.